Welcome, Mark.
Thank
you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Very welcome. Can you tell me a little bit about what is it that Novo Holding does? What is it that you are set in the world to do?
Yeah, of course. Novo Holdings is a holdings company and a life science investment house. Yeah. We are owned by the Novo Nordisk Foundation and the majority stakeholder of the Novo Group companies being Novo Nordisk and Novo Nordisk. Novo Holdings manages the wealth and the assets of the foundation and invest them in the life science ecosystem globally, and also in more, you can see, classical endowment investments, so private equity, equities, bonds, credit, infrastructure, real estate. So it's a quite diverse and quite broad portfolio that we manage. But the Novo Nordisk Foundation is also one of the world's largest enterprise foundations, so that might speak into that point.
Okay. What is it that you do at Novo Holdings then?
Yeah, at Novo Holdings, I'm the head of data and analytics. So you can say, have the overall responsibility for operationalizing our digital strategy as part of the more broad 2030 Novo Holdings strategy. And my team is comprised of both the teams delivering on our AI products and applications, and also the data and platform engineering part, so spanning infrastructure provisioning, cloud architecture, all the security aspects, governance, pipelines, orchestrations, that sort of stuff. So quite kind of full, broad scope of what you would normally distinguish as data and analytics. What is not part of it is business intelligence and automation, but that's part of the broader digital team that I'm part of. So we have quite the service offerings.
Okay. And how big is Novo Holdings? Is it like, because Novo is huge?
Yeah, Novo Nordisk is a big company. Novo Holdings is not. We have undergone quite the growth over the last couple of years, but globally we are 230 people.
All right.
And we are present in 6 countries across 7 offices. So we are headquartered in Copenhagen, with the majority of our investment teams also present in Copenhagen. And then we have offices in San Francisco, in Boston, we have in London, we have in Singapore and Shanghai, and also opening up in Mumbai. So quite a global presence, but that also speaks into the fact that we are investing in the entire life science ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So all the way from research to big global players and market leaders within their fields. So it's a very diverse, as I said, very diverse portfolio, and also a very diverse focus on also how we approach investments.
Okay, and that's kind of in terms of FTEs. You mentioned that it's the biggest enterprise-owned foundation.
Yeah.
What do you measure that in?
Yeah,
so assets under management.
Assets under management is the go-to term for measuring that size. As of 2024, we had 142 billion euros under management. 31 is isolated in our investable portfolio. So that is what's spread across the life science investment teams and our capital investments team. And the rest is tied to the value of the Novo Group companies. So we don't trade the Novo Nordisk shares. That is kept. We are a long-time owner of Novo Nordisk, and that is not going to change.
Okay.
But what is under Novo Holdings' control is the investable portfolio. So that is 31 billion euros as of 2024. And that is spread across 181 portfolio companies in various sizes.
Okay. Are you benchmarking then your asset under management per FTE as well?
No.
Is that a measurement that's important to something like Novo or other foundations or holding companies?
I think the FTE discussion is also always relevant.
Yeah.
So we have comparable investment houses that have the similar ownership structure as we have.
Okay.
But it's not something that we discuss, like how many people are we. What is important is that we keep honoring our ownership model. So we have an engaged ownership model. So whenever we sit or invest in a company, we sit at the board. We have not necessarily a controlling stake in the company, but we need to have influence in how that company is operated. And that, of course, would dictate that you would need to be more people if you invest in more firms or more companies, but that is not the approach that is set out in the 2030 strategy.
Okay. The reason for asking is I was thinking about whether there is a way of measuring effectiveness of a holding company like Novo Holdings. So whether it's how efficient are you at managing your asset under management?
Yeah, that would be the returns.
That would be the returns.
Yeah. So returns is the go-to number.
Okay.
If you can drive returns in two digits over multiple years, it's good. But if you need 1,000 people to do it or 10 people to do it, that doesn't really count into the effect, because we measure the returns after costs. So how much money does it take us to actually drive that return is, of course, important. If we spend $1 million to make $1 million, then we're at net zero. That doesn't really move us anywhere. Okay. So of course, but returns is the go-to measure in terms of, you can say, measuring the effectiveness. And as of 2024, the return was 18%. So that's quite substantial.
Yeah. Not bad.
Yeah.
You talked about a digital strategy that you're doing. So you're not too much focused on making the individual FTE more efficient as such. It's more other parts of the value chain that you're focusing on? Can you elaborate a little bit on what it is in the digital strategy that you're then focused on?
Yeah, exactly as you put it. This is not a cost-cutting exercise. What we want is we want to multiply the effect of our individuals. At Novo Holdings, the most important asset is our people. What we invest in is what you call private investments. So, of course, we do invest in the stock market, but we are a life science investment house, and the largest part, the majority, is what we call private investments. So that is where information is extremely scarce. It lives within the individual firms that we are investing in. So we cannot look up into a database and see company X, how well is it performing? That is not publicly available information. It's also very research and science-heavy companies that we are investing in. Mm-hmm. So our investment professionals also have a quite different profile, you can say, compared to other investment houses. So it is not your usual Goldman Sachs banker type. It is former professors, PhDs in very niche fields that have very specialized knowledge about certain molecules, certain treatment types, medicine, diseases, biology. So it is, at Novo Holdings, the most important asset is our people. So part of the digital strategy is how do we actually squeeze out as much value, and how do we make sure that we don't build up tribal knowledge within our organization. As I said, we are only 230 people, but that is also at the threshold where we are still small, but also large enough so information is not shared easily or just in the canteen. We are also spread across multiple geographies, so communication is key. And to make sure that we don't have this tribal knowledge built up in the individual offices, we need the right system capabilities, the right tools, so we can make sure that information is spread across the organization.
And what tools could that be? What are the portfolio of tools that you have now?
Yeah, so you can say the starting point for the digital transformation. We started off from I would not call it a low point, but I would say almost a blank canvas. Right. So we had the usual business intelligence insight, reporting on our performance, portfolio management, but in terms of pipeline sourcing the deals, that was more it is more manually work, because it's usually built up around individuals' network. Who do they know? What do they know about the field that they are looking into? So information here is more based on the very classical tools as just emails. Right. So what we are building out is more structured systems, a CRM system for our pipeline, where all information is tracked and organized in a structured way, so we can make sure that we can add tools on top of it at a later stage to extract value from it.
When looking across the value chain that you just kind of walked through, where is it that you are putting in most effort right now? Or is the strategy covering all initiatives across the whole value chain, or are you focusing somewhere? Or? What's the approach?
It is focusing on the entire value chain, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So one is building out the foundation so you can solve the challenges at a later stage. If we don't have the right funnel, we don't have the right companies to actually provide a good exit strategy for. So by building out the investment funnel is done through a completely redesign of our CRM strategy. How do we think about gathering information about the market? How do we make sure that our investment professionals are as effective as possible in terms of logging all the information that they have so it doesn't just live in their head, but it can actually be commoditized internally? Make sure that the system lives as close as possible to their actual ways of working, so it's not a burden to use, but it's hyper easy and almost a given. So we keep balancing this give-take, or have this give-take balance in mind at all times. So I want to make it so cheap to actually use the systems because the added benefit or the added value downstream completely is so much bigger than what it costs you to use to begin with.
Does the investors see it the same way? Are they more seeing the CRM as a burden, or can they see that the value, they might put in some effort upfront that they don't see immediate?
Yeah, I think that's the inherent nature of transformation projects.
Yes.
It is just subject to stakeholder resilience or resistance, stakeholder resistance. And it is also in the name. You're transforming something.
Yeah.
You are planning to do things completely different than you are today. You are shifting potential power balances internally. You are changing workflows. You are changing the ways of working that people have built up over long careers and saying, we appreciate what you have done, but now we want you to do it in a different way. But I don't think that people so much are resistant to change in general, but I think they are resistant to change that they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And that is our prime responsibility, to actually sit and see the world from the perspective of our investment professionals and then design accordingly. Adoption is not enforced, it's earned. So we have to build the systems and have to build the tools, and we have to build the workflows that actually support how they can be the most efficient. The people in the organization are the ones that are driving the success of the transformation project. Your plan can be so good and your execution can be even better, but if nobody ends up using it, then it's all for nothing. And we don't want to end up there. So this is how we go about it and how we communicate it internally is that this is not a digital project, this is a business project. We are solving the challenges and the pain points of the organization, making sure they can spend as much time as possible on the things where they truly feel like their value can drive the most benefit, by alleviating all the administrative burden, all the friction, get everything out of the equation, and make sure that we just optimize the time or maximize the time spent on what both they find probably also the most fun, but also the ones where their distinct knowledge or can drive the most value.
Makes sense. So we have the CRM in the sourcing. Mm-hmm. Is that the only tool that you use there, or?
Yeah, you can say the CRM system is the scaffolding. Yeah. So what we build around it is what we call our Halo initiatives, which is all the AI applications and AI products that we release internally. It's also all our data products, you can say, but most of them now have this layered architecture. So there is some part of some either machine learning or AI generative capabilities within the application stack. And what that does is that it takes the individual distinct parts of either the sourcing or the due diligence phase or management or exit and say, okay, how can we do this so it's as close and then feel as a natural extension of their current workflow, but we make it in a way so it extracts the right information much faster than they would normally, but still keep trust and explainability in the forefront. So just having a tool solving something is not the same as that it is actually going to be used. So, and I can speak more into how we think about our transformation program, how we engage with the organization in terms of actually living what we say. But what we are building in terms of feeding into the systems is this underlying, you can say, forest of different smaller applications that solve very distinct problems or very distinct challenges, and solve the actual pain points that the organization has faced previously.
Can you come with some examples of what that could be, like the specific ones?
Yeah. So one that is very relevant for our ventures team is something we solve through what we call therapeutic intelligence. When they are researching into a treatments or unmet needs of a potential or of a disease, they are looking into what actually exists in the entire ecosystem of science related to that potential to that disease. And to do that now is a ton of manual work. You have to go through all the science databases. You have to go through everything related to the FDA. You have to go through all your internal knowledge. You have to go through, you name it, a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And the volume in which that information foundation actually grow is, I think it's around 2 to 3 papers an hour.
What?
So it's insane, not necessarily to a specific disease, but in general.
Yeah.
So it is completely impossible to, as a human, to go through and synthesize all that information.
Yeah.
When it's in the research phase, you also have changing results coming out. You also have conferences where topics are discussed, but the information don't necessarily live in a structured database where you can utilize it. And the change of information is, the cadence of change is quite high. So if I, as an investor, sit down and do my analysis, it is, to be frank, almost outdated as soon as I'm finished, because some piece of information that is part of my analysis has changed. So what we are building with Therapeutic Intelligence is a system in which you go in and then you seek out the potential disease that you're interested in. What are the targets of that disease? You can tag that. It's a drop-down menu. You tag those targets. You look at the efficacy levels, the distinct parts of what is interesting. And then it goes through the entire corpus and the entire knowledge base that we are constantly building out and extract that information. And then it provides you with a comparability analysis of the potential drugs or research that you're looking into that is tied to that disease. And then you validate and go through that information. But what you have is you can go very deep. So this is the answer that we found. This is where it came from. This is the weights and our assumptions associated to that output that we took. And it tags everything accordingly. So you can always go back in time and see, okay, my analysis looked like this 3 months ago. This is what it's based on. Now my analysis looked different. What has changed? And all of a sudden you get this comparability landscape of potential treatments to a given disease, and you get it in minutes. Doing it for one now would take approximately 3 to 4 hours, depending on how broad you want to, you say, do your analysis. How deep do you want to do it if you do it manually? So now you can get that both almost as at an instant, but it also becomes trackable and traceable over time. And that is pretty crucial in terms of what drives our investment thesis. So because we are building conviction over time, we do it based on a corpus of information, a corpus of knowledge. But that knowledge base change over time. And that would then would imply that we had to make changes to our investment thesis. So when we are building this and it's tied to a potential to a given investment case, we have the tags according to what research went into constructing my investment thesis.
Yeah.
And because we have everything tied within one closed loop, one system, if the underlying things change, the investment professional gets notified that you have based an investment thesis based on this analysis.
Yeah.
Underlying assumptions in your investment thesis now doesn't align with the information, the underlying information.
There's
you get notified.
Some risk in the decision or in the analysis. Yeah.
And for us, this is about reducing the risk element in actually making an investment decision. And that is the only way that we can drive the ticket size up, is if we all also reduce the risk. So that is a highly valuable tool. And from an engineering perspective, it's also very, very, very difficult.
I could imagine,
yeah. But that is how we think about it. You can call it a point solution.
Yeah.
It's also one specific problem, specific to one team within our broader organization. So it's not necessarily transferable at an instant across the entire house, but it's something that solves something for very specific people. And I think by having a underlying ecosystem of these point solutions that solve the very hard problems in the organization, I think the total sum of change inflicted by that is what drives us forward.
Yeah, so I'm trying to make this mental map in my head right now with kind of the CRM going across the whole value chain as being the front end, more or less, for the different stakeholders across the value chain. And then there are these point solutions that you just mentioned, the one that reminds me a little bit of like deep research from OpenAI or from Claude or Perplexity, of course, with your specific features as well. And then I guess there's somewhere underneath the CRM and the point solutions, there is some sort of platform to make the whole thing work.
Yeah.
How does that work? So that like we have the Halo front end and then we have some sort of back end or
and I think that really speaks into also where we come from. The beginning of the strategy period marked a complete paradigm shift in how we approached the digital initiatives. But it also came with an acknowledgement that is a part that we have underinvested in previously. So the team was very, very small. It was me and a colleague building out the BI capabilities within the organization and the infrastructure supporting that endeavor. What we are doing now is that we have looked at the desired target state. Where is it that we actually want to end up in 2030? The overall ambition level of the digital department is to be a global authority within digital in the investment space. So the ambition level is set extremely high, but we are almost starting from scratch.
Okay.
So that is, I would say, the main challenge for us is that we are building all the distinct parts in parallel. So we are building the supporting ecosystem of data platform and the platform engineering. We're building out the developer platform to make sure that our developers are as efficient as possible and have the right tools at hand at all time and spend very, very, very little time on actually configuration, but all of their time on building. We are building out the pipeline system, so the CRM system. How do we make sure that we have build out the right funnel for our investment teams? We are building out our automation track. So how do we look at all the manual processes across the organization and how do we alleviate the organization of the tedious, more repetitive tasks, which I think is a common across multiple organizations. And we are also driving a revamp of our business intelligence initiatives. So really making sure that it is as relevant and as flexible and as integrated a part of everything. And we do this acknowledging that you cannot do that. This is change. This is not so much about the technology choices, but more in terms of how do we actually drive this much change in an organization and making sure that you have the organization on board. So as part of the digital team, we have a distinct department just focusing within the team on the change management aspect. Because this is 90% people and 10% technology. Especially now when we are at the beginning of everything, where we have to build everything out in parallel. And we also have a separate adoption track that makes sure that everything is used in the way that we are intended, and that we as developers and individual teams actually respond to the needs and the requirements of the organization. And then around that we have governance, because you cannot build this without trust. And we are also starting from the point where we are saying that we can do a lot of stuff, but we have nothing to show. So in terms of getting the organization on board and gaining their trust, that is something that we really need to take at heart. And that is what drives our decision-making process. How do we design our interactions with the organization? How do we make sure that we truly live when we say that this is a business project, not a digital project? And we have multiple initiatives to support that. So there is underlying infrastructure across everything that we are doing. And we have a very product-focused mindset in terms of how do we actually build that. So I'm a firm believer that you need to think about what it is that you actually want to achieve. And then you need to work your way backwards and think to the left in terms of getting to the point and discussing what needs to be true for us to get to where we want to be. Until you are at the point where now it becomes actionable. Now it's something that you can do. And that is what drives your decision-making process. So whenever we make even the slightest decisions or the smallest decisions within the team, we do it well knowing that where it is that we want to go or where we are heading. And if it doesn't support that direction, then we need to rethink what it is that we're actually doing.
And the target state that you've designed or defined, has that been made together with the product owners in the business or the future product owners of the things that doesn't exist yet? Or how have you approached that?
Yeah, we did a complete deep dive over 4 months last year, where we had individual sessions with each team across the entire organization. So all geographies, all investment teams, all back-end functions, all middle office functions, all the supporting functions in the entire organization, and mapped out all the individual pain points within each team. So what friction are you encountering when you're doing your investment process? And we had a more granular look, not just sourcing, due diligence, portfolio management and exit, but a more granular version of that simplified view on how you make investments. And we took all those pain points across the entire organization and then mapped them in groups. So see what are the commonalities across and what value could we actually drive if we solve those pain points? What would we get out of it? Is it operational excellence? Are we becoming more efficient? Or is it something that actually moves our return on investment? Can we make more per deal that we make, either by driving down the cost associated with making that deal or through making better investment decisions? And then we sat down and then we had made a full catalog of potential use cases that could harvest the value if we solved the pain points. And that was presented to each team in the entire organization. And that was the starting point for the co-creation afterwards. So establishing a foundation for discussion. So this is how we see that we can solve what you describe as an issue, but the investment teams are closest to the ground truth. They know more about the investment process than I think I ever will. So it's also acknowledging the fact that we need their information to succeed. This is not something that we can do on our own. And if we do, it would be very generic solutions that we provided. And that is not what we want to do. We want to solve the real challenges, the real issues at hand. But we can only do that if we truly engage with the rest of the organization. So we had a full list, I think it was 42, 43 potential use cases. And we've narrowed it down to 4 to begin with. But the 4 use cases are, I would not call them broad, but they are more thematic. And they are then comprised of a underlying point solution, approach to it.
Okay.
And that is what we co-create with the organization. Okay. So we have developed what we call a design partner program internally, where we commit to invest all of our time as developers into providing a potential solution. But we then require that the design partner or the individual within each of the team invest a proportionate amount of their time to validate, to test, to discuss, and to make sure that the solution that we provide to them is actually solving the issue at hand. And I think that's a good balance between how do you actually utilize the underlying technologies, how do you utilize what is going on within our domain in combination with what it is that they see in their domain. What we've seen prior to this is that when we talk about problems, our end users have a tendency, and I do this myself, have a tendency to jump to the conclusion and discuss potential solutions to the problem at hand. But the same problem can have multiple solutions. So we are really forcing our design partners to keep just a very narrow focus on the problem, describe it in as much detail as possible. And because we have this commitment of investing all of our time in actually building that product, it's a very iterative approach. So we can have conversations with the organization about potential changes to a given solution, and we can push the changes to their product in the same day. And that because we make these not micro changes, but we constantly make changes and treat the products as a living thing that needs to change and needs to be dynamic and needs to adapt to the requirements of the organization, but more importantly also the underlying processes. So when things change in the front line of the business, that should of course be reflected in the product landscape that underlies it. So that is how we approach it through the design partner program.
Okay. And was that the design partner program? It reminds me a little bit of Palantir's forward deployed engineers, where they kind of just dump in an engineer somewhere and then they work together like in a small unit together with the actual users or business stakeholders. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the only concern that I have when I think about this is kind of the cost of time spent for the investors in this case, right? How did you convince them to actually put in time and effort into this? Because of course hopefully they will get something out of it at some point. They know the use cases, but how did you actually convince them? Was that through that change management, upfront change management, or have you done a business case or something like that?
It is a combination.
Okay.
So through the interviews and the analysis that we did last year, we got a very thorough understanding of what are the pain points across the organization. So that of course elevated our perspective in terms of how can we approach a potential problem. And by investing the time initially, just our sessions, just one-on-one interviews with individuals, and then using that input to build that investable prototype. So a proof of concept, you can say, okay, you have this problem, this is how we think we can solve it. And to kind of get that attention or interest sparked. So
you went pretty far in terms of building something that could look like a solution. Okay.
Yeah.
To make it tangible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had to move away from just PowerPoint presentations.
Yeah.
And move away about the how we think it could solve the things and actually show this is how it solves the thing that you are describing. So of course that is an added cost on our end. And there's also a bet from our side in terms of we are not running out of things to do. We have a multitude of potential pain points that we can attack. So it's also making our understanding of the organization and our understanding of the business and how we stress test it across both our strategy teams and support functions. Where do we think that we can drive the most value if and use that as the way that we prioritize our approach and what to do first. And when we engage with a potential design partner, they are not saying, I want to be a design partner, and then, okay, let's figure out what we can do. We are looking at the pain points and looking who described what teams have described it, and then actively reached out and say, okay, you've communicated this to us. This is how we think we could solve it. Are you willing to test it out with us? And to get that attention, and there was a lot of resistance to begin with. Why should I spend time on this? I'm already completely swamped.
Yeah, exactly.
The ambition level of the 2030 strategy, where I have to do more and deeper due diligence in the same period of time that I used to, is putting a lot of strain on the organization. So of course there is resistance, and we expected there to be. So it didn't came as a surprise. So it's also, I think, for us to be a bit more humble about it and not have that narrative of think we can solve everything, we have the solution for everything. But say, we need you and we need your input to actually refine this. And if you are willing to do this, you'll also be the first one to actually test it out and see how it affects your workflow. And if it doesn't affect your workflow in a positive way, we'll kill it off. There's no way for us to spend time on something that is never going to work and you're never going to adopt because it doesn't really solve the problem that you have at hand. So really be very adamant about that commitment bias. Just because we've started on something doesn't mean we have to finish it if it doesn't provide the value that we expect. So that was the starting point. Build up that trust.
Yeah.
And I think that is I used to say this internally, that we are fortunate enough that we don't have technical depth, but we have a lot of reputational depth. Given the fact that there's been an underinvestment in the digital capabilities internally, and at the same time, we've had a very almost hyper growth in the team, scaling the organization from below 100 to way above 200 in a couple of years. And that has just given us fragmented ways of working, dispersed systems, inconsistent way of storing information, even within teams. So the starting point was already, it is very difficult. You couldn't even solve what we had before. Why can you solve this? So for us, that was this acknowledging this reputational depth and really treating it as such and say, okay, for us to succeed, we need to build up that trust. They need to understand the view that we bring, and they need to understand that our perspective and our narrative is to actually be a supporting partner, like really this business partnering principle, you can say. We want to sit at the table. We want to be an integral part of their teams. And we can do that by solving the challenges and the issues at hand. So resistance to begin with. But I think it's naturally when we have this what's in it for me perspective, when you can see an immediate change and an immediate shift in the way that you are doing things, that it not only covers more than you would normally do, but it also does it in a time frame that is so short that all of a sudden you have time to actually bring your proprietary information and your proprietary knowledge to the table. And then all of a sudden it works as a multiplier effect on the investment professionals. And as soon as you get to that point, then we experience that then people really lean in. And not fighting over who gets to be a design partner, but it's more in terms of it's way easier to actually have that discussion because now people are willing to spend the time required to actually refine the solutions that we are building because they know that give-take balance is in place. So yes, I might invest a few hours now, but I'll gain a multitude at a later stage.
I guess the price tag associated with a transformation like this is also significant. Did you, I guess, of course, Novo and Novo Holdings, some might say that they have almost unlimited funding, but I guess you still had to convince leadership to put in a significant amount of money to do this. Did you then put down like a business case expecting us to be able to improve EBITDA or whatever you decided, or whether asset under management? Did you have like an impact assessment on the more positive side as well for a business case going across all initiatives?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
The expectation of the transformation project came from the leadership team.
Okay.
And they shaped the strategy. And it is the foundational pillar of the entire strategy. So they did understand, even before we began, that if we are going to succeed with what the ambition level that we've set out towards 2030, we need to build out the digital capabilities. We don't know how, but we need to do it.
So they didn't need the same amount of convincing?
No. But it's not the executive management team that lives out the how we build out the digital strategy and how it actually affects the organization. That is the individual people.
Exactly.
So that really determined how are we going to approach our digital strategy, and that is being business first. We are solving the right business needs for the right people, and together we'll steer in the direction where we are all heading. But yes, we did have conversations about how does this affect our return on investment? Can we drive excess returns by having more digital capabilities and the right tools? Can we reduce risk?
Yeah.
And can we keep honoring our engaged ownership model in a lean organization? And it could only be done by putting more money on the table because we still want the same amount of people. It's not saying that we cannot grow in FTEs, but we cannot just not grow symmetrically in the increase in AUM. So there was a broad acknowledgement that this is what we have to do, but it is up to us to actually then provide, okay, how do we then envision the path towards that? What is the ambition level in the coming years? How do we that build out the foundation for the next few years? So we are going from building the foundation to being a fast follower, and then towards 2030, we should hopefully be a global authority within the investment space when we talk about digital capabilities. But we cannot start there. We need to acknowledge the fact that what is our starting point, and then build from there. And this is something how we communicate it, but more importantly, I would say, how do we actually manage the broader digital team in terms of who makes what decisions? How do we drive, we call it decision velocity, how do we make sure that each distinct parts of our team and each distinct part of the full transformation project, how are they as efficient and as effective as possible? And so what we spend a lot of time on, and also speaking to the organization, is to describe the future. How do we see the world look like? And we call it our Halo project. And Halo is this consolidated platform that sits in the middle of everything. I think it's very usual for a lot of organizations that you go to different places for different kinds of information. And if we want this to be efficient and effective, it needs to be an integral part of how we run our investment operations. So that means that this needs to be the tool for the investment professionals, the one-stop shop where they find all their pipeline information, all their portfolio insights, all their analytics tools, all their prediction models, all their research, and all the supporting tools that you can think of needs to be tied into this Halo platform or this Halo project. And that is where we see that people will do their work from. But it is a combination of a multitude of different technologies, different systems, and different products that ties into a more seamless overview of how we run Novo Holdings as a whole. And by describing that in great detail and to a great extent, I have a firm belief that we've set the right team, we have the right people at hand, not only in the investment teams, but also in our digital team, that they know within their domain how do we actually get there. And because we're speaking about the same target state, and we acknowledge the fact that I cannot do anything in isolation, I need to take into account how does this affect the other parts of the team. Am I now an enabler, or am I making it more difficult for my coworkers to actually succeed with what they are doing? So we have governance structures and ways of communicating and organizing ourselves to support that everyone is enabler for each other. But I have a firm belief that within the individual domains, they know how to get there. And what, as the leadership team within the digital team, is our responsibility is more to make sure that they have the right capabilities and the right knowledge and the right tools and the right budgets to actually fulfill what it is that they've set out to do. So being very, very adamant about what it is that we are trying to achieve, and then making sure that we are honoring the principles of decision velocity within each teams, that if you are an owner of a given initiative, that also means that you call the shots. You sit in the driver's seat. And as a leadership team supporting it, it is my main objective or my main purpose to make sure that we keep our individuals within that driver's seat. So as the underlying assumptions or processes or technical requirements change, I need to make sure that we invest in those in our people so we can keep them in their driver's seat, so we keep heading towards the desired end state.
Is it the same end state for your competitors or people like similar to Novo Holdings? Are all of them just moving in the same direction, or are you doing something unique for you, or what's kind of the industry trends in this space?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question, because it also speaks to the fact that Novo Holdings is a very diverse organization in terms that we are not only looking in the venture space. It also capital investments. So our capital investments teams can be compared to more traditional investment houses that buy public equities.
Yeah.
Our seeds team is heavily focused on research. That is what they do. Build out the life science ecosystem to support the future. Our venture team looks in early stage treatments, early stage diagnostics tools, and see how could we actually pick the right competitors within that field and how can we scale that. Our growth team look at the financial aspects of things and see, okay, can we drive this to an IPO? What can we do within this space? And our principal investments team are looking at these global market leaders within their field. And each of the distinct investment teams can actually be compared to what you could call our competitors in terms of other investment houses. So in the venture space, we have our competitors is other venture firms, but they are only working within ventures. We are working across the entirety. So we have to build tools and processes and systems that support everybody. And we cannot only have this very isolated focus on just one team. So that increases the complexity for us. But I think that is why the target state is more complex in our organization, because it's not only caters to one aspect of the investment ecosystem. It caters to a multitude. And we have a very global presence where some of our competitors are more anchored within specific geographies. So we are more broad, both in terms of investment activities, but also in terms of geographies. But what we can see in the individual teams, and we have a great partnerships across multiple companies, and you can also call it competitors. But we do speak to each other, and we do ping pong in terms of how do you think about this? How do you approach it? How do we approach it? And how can we gain the knowledge from each other? But it's more in terms of how to build stuff, not so much in terms of the knowledge that we have. Knowledge is the key asset. But what we can see there is, I call it sometimes a CRM system on steroids, because it's very focused on the pipeline. And some approach it in terms of, can we have model predictions on the funnel of potential firms, and can we have a model cherry pick the companies that we find the most interesting? And I think, yes, that is one approach. Others are very focused on the portfolio company assistance. So once we've made an investment decision, how do we maximize the value creation within a specific portfolio company? And some do this with the more satellite position. You have a development team or other capabilities placed within the portfolio company over a given period of time, and then you try to maximize it. So that is more in terms of like private equity kind of approach, but also used across different parts of the investment lifecycle. And I think our solution is maybe is more of a combination. So I think we need to get our own house in order before we start to tell other people how they should do their stuff. And the way of doing that is building out that halo capability. Because when it is analytics tools, we can onboard our portfolio companies to the same platform and provide them with the same tools, same insights, competitor analytics, market research, whatever it could be, because it's already part of the platform. So that marginal cost of onboarding our portfolio companies is very small. But if we placed our focus only on that to begin with, it would require high conviction that we think this is where we maximize value. But we see that by approaching all the stages of the investment life cycle, I think we can really squeeze out more benefit and more value. If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Are you going back a bit to some of the business case and measuring value from the initiatives that you are implementing? What are you measuring on? Do you have like a KPI that's the most important one, or is it more specific for the different initiatives that you're running? Or
yeah, we have. I think if your initiative is not tied to a KPI, it's a toy, not a tool, because then you're just doing it on gut feel. You need to make sure that what are we measuring the investment that we make into a different product or different tool, what are we measuring it against? What is it that it is trying to solve for? So we have a set of KPIs on top, and I need to make sure that each initiative within the digital transformations feeds into one of these KPIs. I'm not going to brute force it. It needs to come naturally, so it's not you can say an architected KPI where you just brute force your output to feed into how you want to measure it. But I also think you need to be very adamant about, as soon as you're measuring something, that is also what you're optimizing for. So if the KPI that you're measuring is not something that moves the needle or directs you in the right direction, your KPI is wrong.
Yeah.
And this exercise is very, very difficult. So of course we're measuring across does this speak into that we can drive our operations in a lean organization? That could be hours saved, parts of the deals that we make where the tools have been part of the analysis or the due diligence phase or the sourcing phase. But it can also be in terms of validating the investment decisions made and the assumptions made within each of the different teams. So, for example, are we seeing the full scope of the market? It's a yes and no question. But if it's based on a gut feeling that yes, we are, but you cannot document it, that is what we can help the investment teams do. So by having the full overview of the potential pipeline, see and then what is actually implemented within the CRM system, you just get a ratio. And that ratio should hopefully be closer to 1 than 0. And that is a way of validating the assumptions made within the team. Another way that you could use it is also track all the companies that we say no to. How are they actually performing afterwards? So we haven't invested in it, but we still keep tracking how that company actually performs within the market. And you can use that information as a feedback loop into your investment thesis. So if our investment thesis constantly undervalues certain aspects or overvalue other aspects, then you can retweak or you can tweak your investment thesis to account for the more underlying structural things that are part of it. And that is only a possibility if you actually have the full overview of what is going on. So that is also a way of tracking how do we actually drive excess returns. So are we picking the right companies out of the potential pool of investment cases?
Makes sense. There's still a few years until you need to be done and then do the new strategy. So it was a 2030 strategy, right?
Yeah.
What do you think will be the biggest hurdles you will have to get past over the next 5 years?
There's many.
Yeah.
One thing is that now we are so heavily invested in technology and capabilities. And innovation now is measured in weeks. It's not measured in years. So how do we actually set ourselves up for success in terms of when the next hyper-relevant tool becomes available, how easily can we implement it into our own platform and our own ecosystem? And that is a hurdle that we experience now because we need to design our infrastructure and our platform to support things that we do not know what is. And that is a hurdle because that is also the promise that we've made to the organization, that we are building this for the sake of being as efficient as possible as a business as a whole. But to do so, that also means that we need the ability to respond to changes that not only goes on in the market, but also go on in technical innovation. And if we end up in a loop that whenever something new happens and we need to adapt to that new thing, we can just start our transformation project over again because we have to rebuild our infrastructure. And that's not a place where I want to be. So that means that we are spending a lot of time on thinking and testing and trying out and prototyping our infrastructure in terms of, can it actually answer the potential things that happen? And that comes with a added requirement for additional communication, because time spent on future-proofing our infrastructure and our platform comes with the cost that we have less resources allocated to actually developing the tools required to solve the pain points at hand in the investment team. So that is a balancing act. So one of the hurdles, I think, is to have that organizational involvement into the development phases, and to make sure that we, by doing so and the processes that we've put in place now, are fostering a culture of curiosity and appetite for innovation. If it only comes out of our team that we are the ones that have to focus on technological advancements, I don't think that's the success or the way to set us up for success. We do need that front line of the organization. We have office in San Francisco, for example. They are so close to what is going on in terms of tools and technologies that we are utilizing internally.
Yeah.
So they do know what is going on. But if we don't have that forum internally to actually discuss this and have these lines of communication where the information flows to the right people at the right time, then we are not setting ourselves up for success. So that means that we need to be very, very structured in our way on how we build stuff and how we make sure that we are as adaptable as possible. And I think that also, the way how I'm phrasing my answer now is also based on some of the principles that we have in our transformation program. Everything is about risk mitigation. If I know now that this is a potential threat in the future, I take it into account now in my decision-making process. I'm not just crossing my fingers and then hoping it doesn't show up. But I recognize that a potential threat in the future is also a potential threat now, because it can affect or not affect how I make my decisions. So I can make decisions about how decoupled should our technical infrastructure be, or should it be more concentrated? But if I choose either or, it comes with some downstream dependencies that I now have to live by or live with, unless I want to go into this continuous loop of transformation project after transformation project. Yeah. So we are building our platforms and our infrastructure to support things that we do not have now, but to cater to the things that we expect to come down the line or in the future.
Cool.
And the Design Partner Program speaks into how we risk mitigate this, because when we engage with the organization or the organization engage with the development, it's a shared ownership. And I don't need to, or my team doesn't need to be lifted up and say, okay, person X developed this. No, it was person Y in the organization who shaped the development of this product, and that is why we are successful in whatever thing it is that tool might alleviate or help with. So we are building out these internal champions. We don't have this, I can say it's a mix of this outside in and an inside out approach. So from the outside, we have the external mandate and the external requirement from the management team that this is where we need to do something. But how we do it is up to the organization to actually figure out how we want to do it. And I think we do that in combination with the investment teams and the people, not only the investment teams, but the parts of the people of the organization.
Okay. If that's looking forward. If we look back, probably had some really important learnings during this journey so far. what would be your recommendations to, let's say that you were about to start this in a similar company to Novo Holdings, but just from the beginning, what would you do different, or what would be your recommendations to companies starting on a journey like this?
Yeah, I think it is dictated both with how does your starting point look like, and how does the ambition level look like. So that is really something that I also recognize, that we are fortunate in the sense that our starting point was more of a blank canvas. We don't have any legacy systems, weird financial institution, mainframe infrastructure stuff that we had to take into account. So of course that is fortunate for us. So we are more agile in the sense that we can react and respond very, very fast to changes, given that we've made the right choices in terms of how to actually build the foundational infrastructure. So that is one thing, and that is maybe a prerequisite for my answer. But also be really adamant that you need to think about your target state, your end goal, what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then work your way backwards from there, figuring out what needs to be true for you to get there until you get to a point where it becomes actionable and tangible. And then be very, very diligent about your direction, but still be flexible enough to make sure that you can do the adequate changes along the way. So that is one way. Be very, very, very focused on the underlying story that you're trying to tell, given whatever it is that you're trying to do. The other thing is that it is a transformation project, but I'm allergic to the word project. In my world, a project is something where I know how to do things. I understand where I want to go, but I also understand how I want to get there. And that is not how the real world looks like. So we think about our transformation project as a combination of transformation products that we then treat as products. So we are very focused on that product mindset in our development and how we go about doing things. And that also means that we release extremely frequent, not only from an underlying platform perspective, but also from the AI capabilities and tools and applications that we provide to the organization. It is something that has a high cadence in terms of changes, and it is something that is very frequently changed according to take change in processes or increased knowledge from the design partner. And I think that is how you maximize the value of what it is that you are developing. If I just get a spec sheet from a design partner, say this is what I want, and then I build something and then I release it in a few months, what has happened is that the design partner's underlying knowledge has increased or expanded potentially over those 2 months, meaning that their perspective to what it is that you have provided has also changed. So you don't set yourself up to success unless that project that you've pushed now also cater to the fact for the increase in knowledge for your design partner. But having it as a product mindset and frequent releases, you get the additional benefit of that increased knowledge base and that you get from the co-creation from your design partner, because they see the problem at hand from a different perspective or in a different view, because you provide them with additional insights or new ways of thinking. And when you do that, it might take a bit longer to release your final product or your releasable state of the product. But what we experience and what we see consistently across what it is that we are developing is that what we end up with is way more detailed and way more precise than what we've described to begin with. So the additional information that we get. So by having this, you can call it a constant feedback loop, constant live user testing in your development phase, is what we've experienced is a extreme benefit. And it also gives the end user an increased sense of ownership.
Yeah.
So the likelihood of a high adoption rate is also increased. And I think this goes not only for the product development, but also for how you communicate how you want to do things. I think about it as planting seeds in the organization. So I understand where it is that we are heading and what needs to be true for us to get there. But it's not something that I can do on my own. I have cross dependencies in the organization towards you can call it a global IT department, for example. So they are required to provide me with some input or make changes to their ways of working to support what it is that I'm trying to achieve. By planting a seed very early on to the potential stakeholders when you actually want to implement a change, and keeping them engaged and in the loop in your decision-making process and how your project evolves, makes it so when you get to the point where you are at a decision point with your potential stakeholder, okay, we need to make a change, you don't have to bridge the entire, you can call it landscape of knowledge and information, because you've kept them in the loop over time. So it's more costly in the sense that it requires more communication, more stakeholder involvement without actually building something underneath. But it's an investment in a future decision that becomes way easier because you don't have to bridge that entire knowledge gap. It's more in terms of finalizing the details.
Yeah.
Because now you understand what we have gone through over the last couple of months. You understand my way of working, what it is that I'm trying to achieve, what it is that we are solving for, and how and why I need your help to get there. So let's organize the final details and then do it, or not do it if that's the decision. So that is what potentially can happen. And the only downside is that, yes, you've spent some time for increased stakeholder involvement, planting the seeds, and you get to, okay, it's not relevant anymore. In my world, that comes at almost a zero cost. So I would always recommend, and I think that this goes beyond just transformation projects, but if it is that you are trying to drive change or do something differently within an organization or wherever, having the right people informed at the right time makes it so your decision points become way easier. And you get also this sense of not ownership, but understanding, because they're not betting on something. They actually do it on fully acknowledged about what it is that is going on. And that has been some of the driving, you can say, thin red linings across our approach to drive our transformation project is increased communication, have initiatives that potentially and hopefully drive increased adoption, make sure that we build trust in every step that we are doing. If it doesn't build trust, how can I tweak it so it do? Because this is where we are behind the curve. And I want to make sure that we get ahead of the curve as fast as possible, because that is what can accelerate our development efforts. If I don't have to convince people that we are the right people to do things, but they say, okay, yes, we have a track record of success 1, 2, and 3. So I believe that project 4 or product 4 is fine if you just do it, because I know that you understand our way of working and our business to the same extent that we do.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah. That was amazing.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Lots of good insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.